Manchester United's first-team squad have returned to the Carrington training complex today as Michael Carrick's men continue their final preparations for the opening Premier League fixture of the new 2026-27 campaign against Hull City at the MKM Stadium on Saturday. Today's session at Carrington once again combined work inside the gym with intense grass training, with the coaching staff putting the players through a demanding program designed to improve fitness, sharpness, defensive organisation, and set-piece execution. United's preparations were not simply about getting the players physically ready. There was also a strong tactical focus, with the coaching staff working on several important aspects that could prove decisive when the Premier League campaign finally gets underway. The players worked through gym-based exercises before moving onto the grass, where the intensity increased significantly. The session included defensive drills focused on protecting the back line, maintaining compactness, and dealing with dangerous attacking situations. The coaching staff also worked extensively on set-piece routines, including corner blocking systems and defensive organisation from dead ball situations. These are the small details that can make a huge difference over the course of a Premier League season, particularly in tight matches where one corner, one free kick, or one defensive mistake can decide everything. There was also plenty of shooting work, with United's attackers and midfielders being pushed to improve their finishing, movement, and decision-making around the penalty area. For a team preparing for the opening weekend, sharpness in front of goal is absolutely crucial. United will want their attacking players arriving at the MKM Stadium with confidence, composure, and that ruthless edge that every top Premier League side needs. One of the biggest talking points from the training ground is the return and recovery of several players who have been dealing with fitness issues. Benjamin Šeško, Lisandro Martinez, Matthijs de Ligt, Mason Mount, and other players continue to work towards full fitness. And seeing more members of the squad involved in grass-based work will certainly encourage Manchester United supporters. However, United must remain careful with players returning from injury. There is absolutely no reason to rush anyone back and risk turning a short-term problem into a long-term absence, especially with a long Premier League season waiting ahead. Lisandro Martinez, in particular, will be one of the players supporters will be watching closely. His aggression, leadership, ability on the ball, and defensive personality can bring a completely different dimension to United's backline when he is fully fit. Matthijs de Ligt is another important defensive figure whose return could eventually give Carrick more options at centre-back. Mason Mount's availability will also be welcomed because his energy, pressing, and ability to operate between midfield and attack can be extremely valuable in Carrick's system. The big question now is whether Manchester United can carry this positive preparation into Saturday. Hull City will be desperate to make a strong start in front of their home supporters, and opening day fixtures can often be unpredictable. But United will arrive with enormous expectations. The pressure at Manchester United is never ordinary, and the supporters will expect the team to show intensity, confidence, personality, and ambition from the first whistle. So, Reds, what do you think? Can Manchester United start the 2026-2027 Premier League season with a victory against Hull City? Will Carrick's men come away from the MKM Stadium with all 3 points? And which player do you think will be the key man for United on the opening day? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, the summer transfer window remains absolutely red-hot around Old Trafford, and the Carlos Belaba situation is once again generating huge excitement among Manchester United supporters. According to the latest information attributed to Fabrizio Romano, United believe the deal is effectively done from their side and that Belaba will eventually be given the green light to join the club. However, the midfielder is currently dealing with an injury, meaning he would not immediately start for United and could potentially be unavailable until later in September. If that information develops into a completed transfer, it would be a massive statement from Manchester United. Belaba has reportedly been pushing for the move since the beginning of the window, and is understood to be very keen on playing for Manchester United. The midfielder has reportedly made it clear that Old Trafford is the destination he wants. and his desire to wear the famous red shirt could prove extremely important as negotiations enter the decisive stages. From a footballing perspective, Belaba would be an exciting addition to Carrick's midfield. His physical strength, athleticism, ability to cover ground, and defensive qualities could give United an entirely different presence in the middle of the pitch. The Premier League is becoming increasingly demanding physically, and having a powerful midfielder capable of winning duels, recovering possession, and driving the team forward could be a huge asset. United supporters have been waiting for a dominant midfielder who can bring energy and authority to the centre of the pitch, and Belaba certainly fits that profile. The question is whether United can finally get the agreement over the line and whether the club are prepared to meet Brighton's expectations. If the deal is completed, supporters may have to be patient before seeing Belaba properly unleashed, especially if his injury keeps him out until late September. And then there is Lewis Hall. Fabrizio Romano has urged Manchester United supporters not to underestimate the possibility of a move, despite Newcastle United making their position very clear that they do not want to sell the England international. Manchester United, however, have apparently not backed down. United continue to show strong interest in Hall, and the club reportedly remain hopeful that the situation could eventually change. The comparisons with previous Newcastle situations are particularly interesting. Newcastle initially stood firm on those players before eventually agreeing to major transfers, and United appear to believe the same type of situation could potentially develop again. This is where the Ineos strategy becomes particularly interesting. Rather than simply walking away when a club initially says a player is not for sale, Manchester United appear prepared to continue pushing when they genuinely believe the player fits their long-term plans. If Hall remains open to the possibility of joining United, that could potentially become an important factor as negotiations continue. Lewis Hall would also provide valuable versatility. His ability to operate at left-back and contribute both defensively and offensively could give Carrick another tactical option. United have needed greater competition and depth in certain areas of the squad, and bringing in a young English international with Premier League experience could be a very attractive move. But Newcastle's position should not be ignored. If they genuinely have no intention of selling, United may have to make an enormous offer to change their minds. That is why this situation could become one of the most fascinating transfer battles of the final stages of the window. Now let's talk about Bruno Fernandes, because the future of Manchester United's captain remains another major storyline. Manchester United and Bruno Fernandes are reportedly still negotiating over a new contract, but an agreement has not yet been reached. Salary, contract length, and the release clause are among the key issues still being discussed, while his current contract runs until 2027 with United holding an option to extend it for another year. For many United supporters, this is a situation that simply cannot be allowed to become a distraction. Bruno Fernandes has been one of the most influential players at Old Trafford during recent years, and his leadership, creativity, mentality, and ability to produce decisive moments remain hugely important to the team. The question is not simply about wages. It is about recognizing the importance of the captain while also protecting the club's long-term interests. United need Bruno focused on football, and supporters will be hoping that the negotiations can be concluded positively without unnecessary drama. Would you give Bruno Fernandes the contract he wants? Should United make him one of the highest paid players at the club? And what do you think about the possibility of including a release clause in his new agreement? Let us know your opinion, Reds. There is also movement around Joshua Zirkzee. Napoli are reportedly closely monitoring the Manchester United striker's situation and could make a move for the Dutch forward if Juventus fail to complete a deal. According to the report, Napoli have already gathered information about Zirkzee, while Juventus also remain interested. This could become another important situation for United before the transfer window closes. Zirkzee's future will depend heavily on how Carrick sees his role and whether the club believe they need to retain him as part of their attacking options. If Juventus or Napoli make a serious proposal, United will have to decide whether keeping the striker is more valuable than generating funds and potentially creating room for another attacking addition. There is still plenty of business to be completed at Old Trafford, and that is what makes these final stages of the summer window so exciting. United have already made significant changes to the squad, but the club are clearly still looking at opportunities.